2026 doesn't belong to the narcissist who shouts the loudest. It belongs to the empath who finally stops bleeding for everyone else. My friends, as you step into the doorway of this new year, remember, time is not just a straight line. It loops, it revisits. It brings you back to the scenes where your soul once shook and quietly asks, will you repeat the same pattern? Or will you choose differently this time? When I say that 2026 belongs to the empath who faces the narcissist and the family wound that created both of them, I'm not talking about a trend on social media. I'm speaking about a deep psychological turning point that has been brewing in the collective for years. You are stepping into a year that will insist. You stop looking only at the villains in your story and start looking at the emotional atmosphere that raised you. Not just the narcissist standing in front of you, but the unspoken rules in your childhood home. The eye contact that vanished when you had needs. The tension in the room before anyone said a word. Every empath who finds themselves tangled with a narcissist is not simply meeting an enemy. They're meeting an echo, a living reenactment of what their body learned long before they knew the word narcissist. The narcissist does not arrive out of nowhere in adulthood. They are magnetized into your life by unfinished grief, by a nervous system that still thinks, if I can fix them, maybe I finally get the love I never had. Here is the uncomfortable truth 2026 is asking empaths to face. The narcissist who hurt you was never the original source of your suffering. They are the reflection of a pain you learned to normalize so early that it became invisible. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to see in ourselves runs our life from the shadows, and we mistake it for fate. Many empaths believe their sensitivity is a spiritual gift that descended from the heavens. The reality is often more complex. For many, that sensitivity was forged in emotional chaos. They became expert feelers because feeling everything was the only way to stay safe. They learned to spot a storm in the smallest change of facial expression, to decode tone shifts like sacred texts, to sense the mood in the room before the door fully opened. Attunement wasn't a hobby, it was survival. Hypervigilance wore the mask of intuition. Peace was not a baseline, it was an event. This is the hidden origin of the empath's extraordinary capacity, the need to adapt to unpredictable adults, volatile emotions, and unstable love. But 2026 brings a different kind of assignment. It is the year when the empath starts asking, with a quiet spiritual urgency, what about my inner weather? What about the storms in me that I have never named? Instead of aiming their sensitivity outward like a radar, they feel a pull to turn it inward, to finally notice their own body, their own exhaustion, their own unmet needs. Asterisk, this is the threshold of individuation. Jung's name for the process of becoming who you really are, instead of who your family needed you to be. It is the soul saying, stop living as an extension of everyone else's wounds. Start living as the embodiment of your own wholeness. You might ask, why does my transformation always seem to involve a narcissist? Why can't I just wake up peacefully, without being gaslit, drained, or discarded? Because the narcissist, psychologically speaking, is not just a person. They are an archetype. They represent the disowned shadow of the empath. Where the empath bends, the narcissist demands. Where the empath erases themselves, the narcissist inflates themselves. Where the empath avoids conflict at all cost, the narcissist manufactures it to stay in control. They are opposites pulled together with mythic force, because through this collision, each side exposes what the other has hidden. That is why the bond feels fated, electric, impossible to just walk away from. It has the energy of an ancient script repeating itself. The empath looks past the cruelty and sees the frightened child beneath the narcissist's rage, believing, I am the one who can finally soothe this. But this is the great misunderstanding. You are not there to heal the narcissist. The narcissist is there to spotlight your wound, the one that was never allowed to exist inside your family. Everything in adulthood is a continuation of the emotional story that began in childhood. The narcissist in your life is not the first person who made you responsible for their feelings, not the first who punished your boundaries and praised your compliance, not the first who taught you that your gentleness was a duty. The narcissist is the rerun of a family, patterns so old it turned invisible. And 2026 is the year invisible patterns become unbearable to ignore. So many empaths are waking up now, not because they suddenly discovered psychology, but because their soul refuses to keep carrying the same emotional weight in silence. Something in them is tired of pretending the old story still fits. They are beginning to question the family commandments that shaped their identity. Be good. Be quiet. Be understanding. Be strong. Be the one who holds everyone together. These were not pure virtues. They were survival strategies, and they were expensive. They taught the empath that love must be earned, that emotional stability is their job, and that their needs are optional while everyone else's needs are sacred. Here is the revelation. The empath's clash with the narcissist is not really a battle between two adults. It is the return of the original conflict between the child and the emotional dysfunction of the family. The narcissist becomes the teacher who, without meaning to, reveals what the family system never allowed you to say out loud. That affection without reciprocity is not love. That loyalty without boundaries is a form of self-enslavement. That compassion without self-respect is slow self-abandonment. In 2026, the empath is called to confront not just the narcissist in front of them, but the emotional blueprint behind them. They start to see that their tendency to fix, soothe, and endlessly understand was not pure spiritual maturity. It was adaptation. It was the child becoming the stabilizer, the peacekeeper, the invisible glue of the household. That role was not chosen. It was assigned, and now the psyche is demanding release. Asterisk, many empaths experience this awakening as an internal earthquake. What once felt noble now feels exhausting. What once felt compassionate now feels like betrayal of self. What once felt destined now feels karmic, something to be resolved, not repeated. The soul whispers, the era of unconscious loyalty is over. This is the year the empath stops absorbing everyone else's pain and starts metabolizing their own. The year they stop choosing partners, friends, and jobs that replay the same childhood wound. The year they realize that their depth of feeling is not a curse, but a compass pointing toward freedom. Liberation always begins with one moment. The moment the empath finally sees the narcissist clearly, not through the lens of hope, not through the lens of who they could be, but through the lens of psychological reality. They see, often for the first time, that the narcissist's behavior was never proof that they weren't enough. The blame they carried was projected. The guilt they swallowed was inherited. The love they gave disappeared into someone who could not truly receive it. This clarity breaks the spell. It tears up the invisible contract that kept them reenacting the past. It lets them confront, not with rage, but with consciousness. So what does confrontation look like for the empath of 2026. It is not a theatrical showdown. It is not a screaming match on the phone. It is not a desperate attempt to finally be heard. Confrontation at this level is a shift in identity. It is the quiet inner declaration: I will not abandon myself so others can stay comfortable. It is the refusal to keep playing the role the family carved into your nervous system. It is the courage to let the narcissists face their own emptiness instead of using your body, your time, your heart as a container for it. The empath's real power begins here, not in saving anyone, but in walking back to the parts of themselves they left behind in childhood. As they reclaim those fragments, the narcissist's gravity weakens. Family patterns begin to unravel. Freedom stops being an escape fantasy and starts becoming a grounded experience. At this point, something ancient stirs in the unconscious. You realize you have always known this story, not because you studied it, but because you lived it. The patterns you keep repeating are not random. They are the echoes of early imprints. Inside every empath lives a child who learned to read tension like a book. That child is still inside you, scanning, predicting, absorbing. Your adult sensitivity is that old vigilance carrying a torch through time. But there comes a moment when the adult psyche can no longer carry the child's burden. That moment is what 2026 symbolizes, when emotional skill is no longer enough, and emotional freedom is demanded. For years, you've understood others better than they understand themselves. You've calmed storms you didn't create. You've loved without expecting to be loved in return. Now the soul demands a correction, a turning inward, when you confront the narcissist from clarity without revenge fantasies. Without bargaining, you are not just facing one person. You are facing the architecture of your entire childhood conditioning. You are facing the belief that your worth is measured by what you can endure, how much you can fix, how much you can forgive. The narcissist simply drags these beliefs into the light, so intensely that you can no longer pretend they're not there. They expose the wound you thought time had healed, when in reality you just learned to function around it. Adaptation is not healing. Survival is not wholeness. Many empaths carry a secret wish they barely dare to say: to be understood without to be held without earning it, to be loved without shrinking their truth. That dream can't be realized while you are still loyal to the old family story. The awakening becomes painful here, because you often protect the same people who hurt you. You maintain the myth of normal family life, even when your childhood was saturated with emotional neglect, volatility, guilt, obligation, or silent resentment. The mind protects the image of the parent long after it stops protecting the child. When the narcissist devalues you, blames you, withholds affection, or punishes you for having needs, it reactivates that original wound. But this reactivation is not a curse. It is a doorway. Behind the narcissist stand the caregivers who couldn't regulate their emotions, the adults who've projected frustration onto the sensitive child, the atmosphere where love always had a condition. That's why the confrontation feels so intense and disproportionate. You're not just dealing with one person, you're wrestling with decades of programming to confront. In the deepest sense, is not to attack. It is to finally see. To see without fantasy, without terror, without projection. To see the narcissist not as a monster, but as a mirror that shows your forgotten boundaries, your silenced anger, your unmet needs, your inner child begging to be chosen. When you see this clearly, the narcissist's power crumbles, not because you become hard or cruel, but because you stop dancing the old steps. You stop You stop swallowing blame. You stop accepting distorted realities as your spiritual responsibility to fix. You stop offering endless compassion to someone who cannot meet you in the same emotional universe. You stop letting your value be defined by someone else's emptiness in that moment. There is a break in the timeline so profound it feels like stepping into a new life. This is why 2026 belongs to the empath, because they stop seeing themselves as the healer of everyone else and start seeing themselves as the guardian of their own soul. From here, something remarkable unfolds. The empath begins to understand that their compassion was never a weakness. It was a misdirected superpower. Their sensitivity was never fragility, was perception sharpened by survival. The grief comes next. Not grief for losing the narcissist, but grief for losing the fantasy that kept you attached. If I love enough, they will change. If I'm patient enough, they will finally see me. If I sacrifice enough, I will finally be safe. Those illusions dissolve under the light of truth. And yes, the dissolution hurts, but it also liberates. It allows you to meet reality as a guide instead of an enemy. When the empath confronts the narcissist from this place, the inner child finally sees an adult who can speak truth, draw lines, and walk away if necessary. This is the healing the child waited decades for, not a quote, not a concept, but a lived moment of self-protection. As this inner alignment settles, your outer life begins to rearrange. Draining relationships lose their grip. Imbalanced dynamics unravel. Patterns that once felt like destiny now feel optional. You stop chasing intensity and start choosing stability. You stop craving validation and start seeking resonance. You stop hunting for love and start recognizing it. The inner battlefield becomes a sanctuary. New people, opportunities, and identities appear that match your new vibration. You begin to embody a truth you may have heard but never believed. Healing is not becoming who you were before the wound. Healing is becoming who you were meant to be beyond it. Your sensitivity was never the problem, was the map out of the problem. Your intuition becomes discernment. Your compassion becomes strength. Your boundaries become architecture. This is why 2026 is more than a page on the calendar. It is a rite of passage, a turning of the inner wheel, a doorway through which the empath walks, not as the caretaker of everyone else, but as the sovereign of their own inner world. They carry forward not bitterness, but clarity, not fear, but awareness, not trauma, but transformation. The more you care for yourself, the more powerful your empathy becomes, not as a way to survive, but as an authentic expression of who you are. You evolve from wounded empath to conscious empath, one who feels deeply without absorbing, loves fully without losing themselves, and sees clearly without collapsing into other people's chaos. This is the empath who rises in 2026, the one who no longer fears the narcissist's anger or silence or disapproval, because they've reclaimed authorship over their own emotional world. The one who can walk away, not in hatred, but in certainty. The one who chooses relationships from wisdom, not wounds. And now we reach the heart of it. The confrontation was never about winning against the narcissist. It was always about returning to yourself. You came here asking, why do they treat me this way? But somewhere along this path, a deeper question emerged. Why have I treated myself this way for so long? When you answer that honestly, the story changes. The family script loosens. The generational cycle cracks. The pain does not vanish, but its authority over you dissolves. 2026 belongs to the empath because, for the first time, they belong to themselves. You do not exist to be a soft place for other people's unhealed storms. You exist to become the calm center of your own life. If these words resonate with you, if you feel the stirrings of this shift inside your own story, stay with this work. Like this video and subscribe to Mind Alchemy so we can keep exploring this inner terrain together. Tell me in the comments, what pattern are you ready to retire this year? And what new truth are you finally ready to live?